Maintenant, la série de conférences d'artistes qu'on a programmées cet après-midi. Moi, je suis Catherine Nouer, la directrice de la plateforme Cosmopolis et curatrice des 3 éditions, avec des commissaires associés. Ilaria Conti, qui est commissaire associé sur la plateforme, et Jiang Hanlu et Charlotte Dinut, qui sont aussi dans la salle, les 2 autres commissaires associés sur cette édition. La programmation a lieu en anglais, donc je vais maintenant changer de langue. Welcome everyone to this afternoon program around technology and difference in technology, with a series of artist talks and then a series of more theoretical, conceptual ideas exchanges. This program for the opening weekend of Cosmopolis is an event that has been constructed with Digital Earth, a very important new platform for artists from Asia and Africa, working with technology that offers an incredible support over a year for research and the production of work in association with that, but not necessarily, not imposing the necessity to produce. So it's a really extraordinary opportunity for artists to go deeply into a new area of research. Cosmopolis and Digital Earth collaborated around the work of 3 artists presented in the show who have, for the last year, been supported for their artistic travel, research, and periods of filming and production across different areas of Asia and the African continent. So those 3 artists are Tabitha Rosaire, whose work is behind you in this area, Mamelle Ancestrale, looking at the standing stone circles of the Gambia and South Senegal. She's not here today, but gave a wonderful performance yesterday. Emo de Medeiros, who is with us in his dark glasses in the panel over here, who will be presenting the work that he made across Dar es Salaam, Lagos, Shenzhen, and in Brazil. Francois Knoetze, whose amazing installation integrating his 4 core dump videos is shown here for the first time also from South Africa, but who produced the work across Dakar, Kinshasa, Shenzhen, and New York. And we have with us today also another artist who's not part of the Digital Earth platform, but whose work strongly engages with the theoretical underpinnings of where technology is going today, and that's Tricky Walsh, whose extraordinary wall painting that has a dimension in augmented reality, broken symmetries, is shown behind this wall here. What we are going to do is Arthur Steiner from HIVOS Digital Earth is here with us and will give you some more insight into that platform after our artist talks. We're going to kick off first with the extraordinary curator, thinker and writer Oulimata Gueye, who's been integrally associated with the production of a number of works in this exhibition, but is one of the key thinkers, curators and writers, as I said, working in terms of technology, particularly in relation to the African continent today. So Oulimata, I'm going to hand over to you now, and we're actually going to go for a bit of a walk.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. So we have decided to propose you another configuration rather than talking together around this table, to invite you to go with each of the artists to speak and to present and to talk about the works. And then we come back here, and Arthur, you will talk a little bit longer about the Digital Earth program, and we will share a moment of discussion all together. And of course, you are invited to ask questions during the presentation of the work. So it's a more informal configuration that I think fits with our the way we are. So maybe I start just to start with a short introduction about something that I found as a context. According to me, we are still, internet is born between the encounter of the research and the counterculture of the American during the 60 period. And it has brought this idea of a utopian world which will reconcile the issue of gender, race, which will abolish the barrier of the social and the geographical barrier. And of course, with the massification of the internet, we realize that it's no longer the story that we can bear. And all over the world, technology have developed with the massification, which developed with the massification of internet are worrying, to the point that we can wonder if internet might not be the greatest dystopia of the 21st century. The web and the digital technology that organize ourselves are increasingly monopolized by small urban by a small number, of multinationals that have transformed the web into a vast commercial space structured around application platforms that capture a growing share of internet traffic. Whistleblowers have highlighted the urgency of analyzing the relation between technology and the persuasive form of control, data monitoring, body recognition, software, predictive analysis, and data mining. Digital technology promotes innovation, but this innovation still requires as many materials as ever, and particularly material that are sensitive in terms of environmental protection. And at the same time, there is relatively little innovation in the recycling of electronic waste. So digital technology are energy intensive. And finally, the storytelling which emerged from the Silicon Valley seems that the future is confiscated by the transhumanist project developed in the laboratory of the Singularity University, which aimed to relaunch progress mainly through research in neuroscience and pretended that they could transform our humanity. So I think that the project that you have developed and we have here are the project that critique or that wants to give another vision of those technology, and that's what we are going to develop together. So I invite you to go, and you'll see that it's easier for me. I'm sorry, my English is. Voilà, I always have time to develop. So, are you okay? I suggest that we can start with Emo presentation. Yeah. And I invite you to stand near your work. Stand near my work? Yeah. So, although you prefer to stay here? Okay. Okay. I have suggest that we can start with your work, Emo, because as I told you a few minutes ago, I'm searching on the history of the development of digital technology on the African continent. And the more I go in it, and the more I understand that there was two main discourses. One, which come from the late 90s to the 20s. The main discourse on the African continent was the fear of a digital gap. The idea that as the penetration rate was very low, internet would never be able to widespread on the continent, and that the continent would have to face a new divide, which will be the digital divide. Contrary to this story, the mobile has developed and has allowed the internet to penetrate on the continent. And now we have another kind of discourse, a meta-discourse, which is the discourse of the leapfrog. And if we go in this history, we realize that internet on the continent has really linked to the politique d'ajustement structurel, the politique of the monetary, voilà, IMF, and that either the provider or the manufacturer have adapted their proposal to the continent, offering cheap mobile phone, and adapting their offer to the need of the continent. And I think that we can find there the origin of the so-called mobile boom of the continent. And I was interested in your work because you addressed this culture of mobile, which has been the starting point of the discourse of the leapfrog on the African continent. So I wanted you to talk about the way you have worked, what you have found in this mobile culture, and what are the differences, because you have traveled quite a lot in different places all over the world for the project.
Okay, I'm going to start with a personal anecdote. When I was growing up in Benin, in the 80s, what was really interesting is it was very, very difficult to get a landline. So essentially you had to corrupt someone who was working for the phone company to get a landline. It could take 6 months to a year. And this project started to interest me when I was, actually it was kind of interesting because I was in Cotonou, where my main studio is. And at some point I noticed that my studio is in front of high school. So I started to notice that pretty much every kid had a smartphone. Not every kid had a smartphone, but I would say every kid had a phone, and probably half of them had a smartphone. Now, you have to keep in mind that a smartphone is approximately, the price of a new smartphone is approximately 1 month's salary, a little bit over a month's salary of the minimum wage. So it really struck me, and then I sort of got even more curious. As I was walking in Cotonou, I noticed that pretty much everyone had a cell phone, and that is confirmed by the numbers, because in Benin, 70% of the population is under 25, and there is a penetration rate of 90% of smartphones. So that gives us more than a cell phone per person. And out of these, approximately 30% are smartphones, which is pretty close to total coverage of adults. So that's one observation. And then what I was also interested was the common gestures, meaning like in different cultures, many, body language, for instance, is pretty different. And then in the handling of smartphones, by definition, everything was very common, but not only from the use of it, taking pictures and so on, but also in the repair of it. And what struck me was also the very precise and minute use of tools, and that were interchangeable with gestures made by robots. Like, for instance, there is an image in the film that we're seeing right now at the very beginning, where you see a human hand putting on a robotic, putting on a platform, then a robotic arm screws the screws, and then the human hand takes the phone again. Now, this is in Shenzhen. It doesn't happen like this where the cell phones are made, but it doesn't happen like this, of course, in Benin, for instance, or in Nigeria. So this very close, choreography, in a way, of the hands really struck me as being completely transcultural. Transculturalness is something that really interests me. And apart from that, I was also interested in the fact that we hear a lot that the digital civilization is about dematerialization, whereas I found something that was I could observe something that was very different, that is highly material, highly bodily, and highly incorporated. And as for the digital, what I call digital districts, where I had the opportunity to film, also something that struck me is they're very, so there people can see more of the context. I chose to focus on the hand and what I'm showing right now. But also, what also was interesting in the video on the left, I mean, on the videos on the left, is that you don't really know where you are. Shenzhen is obviously very different because it's sort of city of the future. I mean, I guess François will say more about this, but for the rest, whether you're in Salvador, Dar es Salaam, Lagos, or Cotonou, it's very difficult. I mean, from shot to shot, you don't really know where you are. So for me, it was like some kind of decentralized, extended and fragmentary, and also fractal city, which I decided to call Android City.
You see, you say that it's very difficult to see the difference, and at the same time, I think that technology is also deeply rooted in. There is these two levels of digital technology. One, which is, as I told you, this idea of the mobile was the best form to develop on the African continent, but you can understand how it's rooted in the history and the economy and the social structure of the continent, and at the same time, it's meta aesthetic, where it's very difficult, as you say, to see the difference.
This I can say something about. I didn't get the opportunity because they're going to have an IPO very soon, so they didn't want to give access to their factories. But there is a holding from Shenzhen, which is called Transcion, and that developed 3 brands. One is ITEL, the second one is Infinix, and the third one is Techno. So I was really interested in using Techno because, of course, of the techno, whatever. And but I couldn't film with them. But the techno was was created on an idea by a Nigerian who was trying to develop cell phones with 2 SIM cards, which didn't exist until the end of the 90s. And he was actually refused. I mean, Nokia refused. Any of the major brands refused. And Techno got actually interested in this. And they moved to smartphones around the mid-2000s. And what's really interesting is that one of the particular landmarks, especially in Africa, is the fact that Techno has had a very aggressive marketing policy. And in particular, they offered a lot of marketing materials, such as tape. So you have pretty much Techno everywhere. On the drone shot that you see of Lagos, this is the single brand that stands out. And one thing that's interesting about Techno is, like, after moving from those 2 double SIM card phones, they decided to enter the smartphone industry, but in a way that was kind of smart. They were addressing bottom of the pyramid, which is what you were referring to, and what is the term that is widely used. So the people who have a very low income. So they were addressing bottom of the pyramid populations, and they customized it for the African population in 2 ways. Number one, Africans kind of like bass on the music, so the speaker phones of the phones are more bass oriented. And the second thing is the photos. I mean, the cameras. The cameras are actually designed to have better definition. There is an algorithm that gives a better definition, better restitution of darker skins. And what's kind of interesting also in the psychology is, like, I mean, I wouldn't say I kind of dislike the people who talk about Africa as a whole, but in the places that I could see, there is a really very pronounced bias toward the selfies. And the fact is, like, in Dar es Salaam, they were launching their new smartphones, which for the first time, I've never seen this on another smartphone. The camera for the selfie has actually a better definition than the camera to film of the outside. And second thing that's also interesting, but that's another discussion. The photos of people have a better definition for darker skin, but for whatever reason, the restitution of the people have a lighter skin on the photos than they have in reality. So that's something else.
Thank you. It's very interesting. So it leads us to François and your work. because as we can understand what I've called the so-called Leapfrog Discourse, this idea that the African continent have been able to reach and to go over this digital gap and being able to invent and to innovate beyond what was expected is as an explanation in the liberal and techno-scientific economy, and mainly driven by the multinational of the Silicon Valley. And you address this in your work. So, what do you want to proceed? Can you? Yeah. Okay. So. Your work is called core dump. So my first question is, what is core dump? What is core dump?
It's a computer term that relates to the memory of a computer at a certain point in time. And if a computer crashes, it goes to the core dump, basically, and accesses these files and tries to reboot and repair itself according to what this memory image is. Yeah.
And we stand here because this is the first, so the core dump is made of 4 chapters, Dakar, Kinshasa, Shenzhen and New York. We stand here because this is the first, this is the starting point, or the first chapter of this work. And we are in Dakar. We are in the office of a repair. It's a repair shop from Monsieur Diop that you met, and it's also funny because Monsieur Diop was a retired. And he was one of the people that set up the television network in Dakar in the 60s. So it was quite interesting to meet especially this person. And I think it's not by chance, because I think the digital and the information technology has always been a point of debate, and especially I have to jump on another point for this video. It's that in this video you explore this issue through the lens of this, as you say, the techno-utopia of the Silicon Valley and the utopia of the non-aligned movement. And one of the main points of the discussion in the 70s of the non-aligned movement was the control over the communication. And I think that Mr. Diop was also part of this generation of people who has been trained in Europe and who are supposed to bring the information and technology network in the continent after the independence. So it's kind of a continuation of a long history. But I'll let you continue, because you make a link of the digital and the relation between the minerals that come at the beginning of the technology and the e-waste that is at the end, and how the continent is involved in this cycle of this product.
Yeah. So I suppose I in the project I try to kind of link the contemporary to historical processes and to specifically colonial processes. Coming from South Africa, that's my frame of reference to how, with the way that gold was extracted there and the processes that surrounded that. I kind of tried to look at the digital, the movement of digital devices, or the supply chain around the world, but both as objects, going from I try to link kind of different spaces, geographical spaces. But also, obviously, a lot of the infrastructure is invisible, and it's networks that are connected through architectures that we can't kind of see immediately, and basically looking at these multinationals and how they centralize power, but they do it in a way that's quite difficult to pin down often, and they come with not with big armies, but they come with big ad campaigns, and they find different ways of infiltrating emerging markets, which I suppose the African continent is. The starting point was kind of trying to see how it was possible for. I came across a video where a news presenter was saying that there was recently some tests done on people recycling e-waste, and that they found a lot of heavy metals in the blood of people that recycle this e-waste, and I kind of was interested in imagining the journeys of these minerals and these metals around the world, and how they are mined often in the DRC, and they have this long journey, and then they end up back on the continent.
I see that you also working more and more about on this issue of pollution and how you link it with colonialism. I'm also interested in knowing more about how you come to that and what you think about that. And maybe we can jump from another video.
I'm interested in e-waste as a type of kind of new pollution that's growing very rapidly, and it's not kind of really the the people that produce it don't have the responsibility to clean up the mess. It's a very complicated kind of type of waste, because it's got so many different components and minerals and things all crammed and welded together, and plastics, and it's just a lot of stuff is just completely impossible to recycle. And with this idea of having to, African countries having to catch up or play catch up to this ideal or the standard that's set by the US and by Europe about what it means to be advanced technologically. A lot of the waste gets exported as used electronics, but often it's just trash. So this idea of the ruling elite of the US trying to say what the standard should be, and then finding ways of convincing African states that they have to catch up to this. That's kind of also what I'm interested in.
And so it's, as I was asking to Emo, so you made this 4-city journey and exploration and inquiry also, because I think that your work is also based on this idea of to l'enquête, so how to inquire on a very precise subject. And I wonder what you could say about these 4 cities and how they relate and how they are a different approach of technology. The third city is Shenzhen. This is New York. Okay. Emo, we thought that it was a perfect position to debate between the two artworks, so between you and Francois.
Yeah, I mean, I went, I think in February or January, and it was kind of difficult to get into a lot of places I think you got into. So I kind of had to reassess my approach, but well, I don't know what the question really is, but how did you find it there?
Actually, I received the help of Li Wei from 33 Art Space. And so he was very, very efficient. So I had a few, for a previous installation a few years ago, I was interested in using a lot of smartphones at the same time. So I had a few contacts and from different factories and makers, cell phone makers. Some of them doing OEM, which is if you want to start your own brand of smartphone, you just go to them. They build your smartphone and just put your brand on it. And so we used some of this, and he had some other contacts, and I got very lucky actually, because right next to 30th Street Space there was this sort of little factory, and he got the news that they were assembling smartphones like the very same day. So we just jumped there, and I was also lucky that they were very late, so we filmed from, I don't know, 7 to 11. And because I filmed in... I went to Dubat as well, just as you do, just you did. But I don't know, did you get to film? I thought I had seen a few images from the yellow one, the very big one that are at the workshop in the back, because they completely refused that I filmed them. Okay, because they showed me the robots that are completely crazy, but they refused that I filmed them. But we went to Dubat and Ulefone. And this little company I don't know the name of, and that's where we filmed. And the rest I filmed, with repair people. They were like pretty open and very nice and let me film easily.
So we can have a look at your work with the 3 screen. Just if you want to just develop this.
Okay, it's pretty simple. The central video is the one that we're seeing on the other screen. So it's an 8-minute film focusing on the what I call the choreography of the hand. And it's kind of interesting to see, like, for instance, this is in China, the guy is using his nail to actually unscrew something. And all sorts of, this one was in Dar es Salaam, this one, so when you switch from hand to hand, you switch from place to place, but the movements are kind of similar, so that's what interested me. And on the right, you only have, I like this one, on the right, this one. The drone does this on itself. And on the right, you'll essentially have like wide-angle shots, drones that give you context and how. So this is Cotonou. It's like in Technicolor, because that's the least advanced of the places I went to. The digital district is super small. This is Shenzhen, obviously. And this is Dar es Salaam. And so here you see Galaxy and Techno was actually super smart because they reused the Samsung's blue. So on the right is only the context, the different visions. This is a computer city in Lagos. So you see Techno everywhere. Everywhere it's blue, it's Techno, essentially. So you can see like the print except the little Samsung thing. And on the left, there were essentially musings, and I'll try to, this is a drone too, but eye level. And so I was more interested in restituting, what it felt like to be and to walk around the digital district.
Thank you, Emo. So, we talked a lot, you talked about Hanshan and Techno, and in a way this is also why you choose this idea of Mamiwata, because the story of Mamiwata, I don't know if maybe you can just say a few words about Mamiwata. So Mamiwata is comment dire, a mermaid, une sirène, a mermaid. It's a goddess, but in fact, the term Mamiwata could come from Mother Water, and could be the translation of the encounter of the European boat at the 15th century on the coast of the west coast of Africa, and Mamiwata could be the mythology and the goddess who emerged from this encounter. Mamiwata is, as Joseph Tonda, one of the sociologues and the researcher that your work is really based on, has described Mamiwata as an hybrid creator that brings you wealth, but that take your life, or that take possession of you, that control, that colonize you in a way. And your starting point was that some Mamiwatas appeared on the screen and in the internet, and maybe pointing the difficulty of the relation between the Chinese and the local population in Kinshasa. No, it's...
Yeah. Yeah, so you sent me the paper that kind of spoke about the phenomenon of videos appearing online in the DRC, purportedly kind of showing that Mami Wata had been captured by Chinese river workers who were laying fiber optic cables to connect Kinshasa to Brazzaville. And the author writes about how this relates to kind of the uncertainty of the time and the suspicions perhaps arising relating to the Chinese presence in the DRC, and how it relates to kind of the infrastructure for resources program, where China is kind of building critical digital infrastructure, but in exchange for raw materials and minerals. So they're reopening a lot of the mines that have been kind of abandoned or closed for a while, cobalt mines and coltan and so on. And I wanted to take that idea as a starting point of Mami Wata being captured and taken back to China, and how, what this figure would represent in this space, in Shenzhen, the first economic freedom zone in China, and the hardware kind of production capital of the world. And so I then related, obviously the DRC has a long history of slavery through the Belgians, and the Congo River was the supply line for that trade. I wanted to kind of look at factories in Shenzhen and recent recent cases of people committing suicide from factories and jumping out the windows, and there being suicide nets installed outside of certain factories, and relating that to, I suppose, I saw images of slave ships in the transatlantic slave trade having often installed similar kind of suicide nets, and how these kind of link visually, even though the one is at the pinnacle of digital kind of development and the other one is what we consider as history or whatever.
The long-term history of the relation between colonialism and digital and science. Now we're gonna take, where is Tricky? Where are you? So we invite you to come with us and to talk about your work.
Okay. Well, there are a few things going on with this piece. It's a painting. It's titled Broken Symmetry, which is a physics concept about how you can disrupt a system through very small fluctuations and force it to make a decision and determine change within a system. So this is the optimistic part of my story, so we'll hang on to that. And then the rest of it is I quite often write or use ideas from science fiction or hard speculative fiction within my work. So last year in China, in Cosmopolis 1.5, I constructed a device which theoretically would help us perceive the next dimension, because there is a lot of research at the moment from theoretical physicists about how, we live in 3 dimensions. Theoretically, maybe we only actually live in 2 dimensions, but maybe at some stage we'll have access to 8 or more. So it was the idea that that post Cosmopolis 1.5 that we can now access this next dimension, because I think that, I'll get back there, but I think that science fiction quite often offers us a better perspective on our position in the present than making any sort of commentary about where we'll be in the future. So what I was thinking was then, if we could actually access this further dimension, what would happen, considering how we are, who we are, how we treat each other, how we utilize our resources. What would we do with unlimited access and unlimited resource to other things that were like us but not of us. So my story kind of, it travels from, okay, so maybe we can access other dimensions and then we use them for our own material gain, whether that's through labor forces or material exploitation. And then I thought, well, maybe we'll learn our lessons at some point and we'll stop repeating them. So I'm sort of allowing us to progress through this point, and maybe we learn that colonizing is bad, hopefully, one day. So maybe we then change the rules so that, I can colonize every other infinite version of myself, and I can decide through some sort of intellectual property right what to do with the other me. And then eventually we'll discover that's terrible as well, because it's a horrible idea, and most ideas in science fiction are just the worst in humanity. So then maybe we'll learn how to access a time dimension, and then we'll go back and try and eradicate our behavior. But then we'll just keep repeating this sort of loop. So I ended on this kind of, I think I'm sort of hoping to present a sort of awful worst case scenario in the hope that we might encourage change and agency within ourselves to not repeat patterns. Do you have any questions? Because I'll just keep rambling.
No, it's good. It's make me think about, because I'm also a big fan of science fiction, so it's make me think about two women. The first one is Octavia Butler. I wonder if you know her work and how it's exactly. And when she said that there's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns. So we don't have lots of expectation that things will change, but maybe in the margin things can happen, and that science fiction can be used not to change the world, but to get confidence in our capacity to maybe have the possibility to think about change. For sure. In a way. And the other thing, it's about Donna Haraway. We say that when the tool we have at our disposal do not allow us any longer to understand the world, so she called for fiction, and she wanted to do it in the joy of the revelation and the imagination. So it's and also the fact that it's you use your body. You make this by yourself, and it's a very embodied dimension of technology. I think the most embodied dimension of technology in our free work. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like the analog contingent in the world. My technology is a paintbrush, and the place that I live in, our major industry is, the export of trees for toilet paper. So I come from a very different place, I think. But both of those writers in those statements are spot on. And there's another one by Ursula Le Guin, which states that, we have to reimagine a different future, and it's the only way we can overcome capitalism, and that she used science fiction in order to step so far outside our known commonality in order to affect change. And it's such a great medium for feminism, for queer theory. I mean, it's by just being able to actually take one step sideways, present something very different in a non-threatening way, which is also why I use a lot of color. It's kind of seductive, and it lets you, puts you in sort of a meditative state, which is the same sort of state I'm in when I'm painting it. So, and then the words are sort of subliminal. Except, this is E. She's gonna take everyone through how this works. So, it's a painting. It's also augmented. So, with Art of Eve. And so basically I was working with augmented reality artist Charles Clapshaw, and what he's done is he has taken this very flat dimensional aspect and given it another dimension, which is actually really lovely. So it's kind of, it's interesting for me, and I'm going through a lot of thoughts at the time, but it's this there is a belief at the moment that we live in this sort of two-dimensional holographic system, which is a shifting series of planes, which is actually kind of what I'm alluding to with the separate pieces of paper as well. So everything that we perceive is just a series of images, like a film strip that just animates slowly and progresses. And light and time, they help us to make sense of that. But then it's sort of, I mean, it's funny, there's this introduction of technology into this second dimension too. And some of it is actually really quite wonderful. It, when you look at it from an angle, it actually comes right out of the wall, which is lovely. Oh, with the technology. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's been an interesting process for sure.
So, I don't know. This one.
Yeah. You can download an app on your phone as well, but so, I mean, it's kind of funny whether we use these devices to suggest or be able to perceive the third dimension.
No.
Yeah.
And last, I wonder, it's nothing to in relation specifically with this augmented reality dimension. I come back to another question, because I wonder if it's in your sphere, and I think so. Your relation with black feminism, or black feminist, or black women author.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine's been great. She's been giving me the best reading lists possible, but I was being really mindful to, you know, if I'm looking at history and I'm looking at the way that we have behaved in the past, is actually to acknowledge through those authors who, and their stories and their narrative, and to embed that somehow into hopefully a possible future that we might not repeat. So Sylvia Winter was really inspiring for that especially, but there were a number as well. But Octavia Butler, in a science fiction way, has been very inspiring as well. I think it's also important, if you are trying to conceive of a future world, that you include everybody's voices. So I was hoping to do that.
And I see in a way a relation with this augmented reality dimension with technology, this idea that technology has overshadowed lots of contribution from women, from black women, from Africa, from other parts of the world. And this augmented reality, maybe one of the aim could be to lead us to a bigger perception of this history of technology, but we'll see. So it's, I think, time to meet again in the central space. So we have two other aspects in this. First, it's your time to speak with the artist and to ask questions if you have. I invite you to ask questions if there are. And then Arthur, you will present us the Digital Earth project. But just we check if there is no any question. Let's Emo. So we, Arthur, maybe you can present the Digital Earth, and then we come back to the audience with a question.
Sure. Yeah, and then afterwards we can have maybe another discussion about it. So I'll keep it also short. So my name is Arthur. I'm working at HIVOS, program manager of Digital Earth. So I'll give a very short overview of Digital Earth as a project and what we have been doing over the last 1.5 years. Digital Earth started last year as a global research network of artists and scholars who map out, grasp and picture how technology in the 21st century is shaping geopolitics. So you could almost see it as a kind of global think tank that looks into how different parts of the world are changing because of planetary scale technological developments. So that's in short, I think, what the Digital Earth Network is. To give you a few examples of how geopolitics are changing because of these technological developments and kind of the urge of the project. Well, you could think, for instance, about like the Chinese-owned computer villages in West Africa that we've also seen in some of the images and the work of Emo. But you could also think about like cloud platforms like Google taking over the function of a state, such as the Google ID, or nation states morphing into cloud platforms, like, for example, in Estonia or e-Estonia, with their e-residency and their digital form of governance. Or you could think about the recent battle between Trump and Huawei. Well, these are all examples, I think, of techno-geopolitics that are really influencing our world today. And that also threatening to carve up the tech world into national boundaries. Some have called this also recently the kind of balkanization of technology, with tech companies creating geolocked services for specific markets. So how to make sense of this multiplicity in technology around the world? And how can we map out, picture and grasp how these rapid technological developments shape geopolitics at different parts of the world? And how does it happen in different geographic locations? So these questions were the starting point for us to set up the Digital Earth project and to gather together and exchange global knowledge on this, bringing together researchers, artists from various geographic locations through the fellowship program. So this year we have supported 20 artists, whom you can see here, through Digital Earth, to conduct research at a specific location. So some of our fellows did research in China, others in the mines in Congo. Others went to Uganda and looked into the technological traditions there. Others more into infrastructural projects, such as Digital Road and Belt Initiative. So various of these projects. And the role of us, as Digital Earth, is very much a facilitating role. So we offered a monthly stipend to the participants of the program to conduct research and produce work. And we also offered a research and production infrastructure, small, consisting of like residencies, a network, mentoring, and also some courses. And the outcomes of the research are now finished. So we're at the end of the program, actually. And some of the outcomes are also here present at Cosmopolis, and really happy about that. Also, other works are being shown at other places in the world. Next to the fellowship, we are also organizing events and gatherings and public events actually to discuss these important developments with a wider audience and to showcase also the outcomes of the research. So before Paris, we did this also in Moscow, in the Strelka Institute, in Ashghal Alwan, in Beirut, in Kosh Workshop in India, and in Dakar. And in 2 weeks, we have our final event actually in Dubai at Jamil Arts Center. Then I would like to briefly say something about the next step, actually. So because the fellowship is coming to an end at the end of this year, what will we be doing next? And that's actually a publication that we are currently working on, and really in initial stage. And that's actually the place where we see also the research findings to materialize in this publication. So we envision the people involved in the Digital Earth project, some of them, but also a wider group of the program to be part of that from different disciplines and from different geographical context again. And this atlas, we see it as including maps, but not like the traditional forms of maps, such as diagrammic representations or urban plans or data visualizations. But again, we envision to do this with artists and designers in collaborations with academics and technologists. And these will be combined with text and essays by people of our network, And we're also actually looking into digitally augmented some parts of this publication, but it's very in the beginning part, so we have to speak with you how to do this. And we have chosen actually the format of an atlas because an atlas has always been there to provide navigational tools to people and to navigate through complexity, right? So, however, a new atlas is actually needed to grasp this complexity and abstraction of the technology globally. Vertical Atlas will be hopefully this new atlas to help people navigate the complex techno-geographies in the world today. And we hope that it will spring new political and social action and generate spaces for human agency also. So we hope to give a form almost to this abstract technological developments and related shifts, geopolitical shifts, and thus create new ways to grasp these developments for people that are actually impacted by all these technological developments. So I'm going to say like two more things about Vertical Atlas, but also about like the kind of outcomes of the Digital Earth, like two like major findings. Although it's also a bit early for us because we have been all the time like working and organizing things. But the first one is, I called it now technology and difference in relation to this event. And it relates mainly to cartography as a kind of way for centuries. Let's put it in another way. Technology for centuries has been actually a project of in service of existing power structures. Maps depicted territories from the perspective of the commissioner, and for a long time cartography largely helped organize colonial projects of the Western powers, and in turn reflected the code and codified its effects. Currently we see this like similar kinds of developments with Google Maps and corporate-run mapping services and systems. And they are made in service of the needs of the global and local market powers, and as such, again, reflect this universal, implicitly normalized perspective. Again, a descendant of the colonial drive. And as much as digital geopolitics is a global phenomenon, it manifests differently in different regions of the world, with different implications locally and internationally. So that's really one of the core, I think, of Digital Earth and also of the Vertical Atlas. The core element of this project is to account for these multiple geographic locations and thus include multiple perspectives as well as practices in this act of map making of this planetary technological developments. So as well as Digital Earth, also the book will be created by experts and researchers in different geographic locations. So this kind of, like difference or diversity was one of the main things. And the second one that we're going to look into is this idea of vertical or horizontal cartography. So the standardizing gaze of modern cartography is not the point of view from which this atlas will be made. The abstraction of the Mercator projection we are familiar with in modern maps accounts for very little of the new realities we are confronted with. Representing the world as a horizontal plane of nation states and land does not do justice to the complexity of the technological reality we live in. Think, for example, about the new national borders that are created in cyberspace, or new borders are being materialized in strange places in the world, such as the cobalt mines in the DRC that you also mentioned, that are owned by China, or like Amazon cloud service in Singapore. So for these reasons, maps in the Vertical Atlas will be created by artists and designers rather than only cartographers in order to give this kind of verticality and tangibility to the phenomenon at hand. So we aim to give form to this abstract technological developments and picture these developments from, let's say the earth layer and the cables and the fiber optic cables underground to like this more abstract domain of data and satellites in space. So it's really this kind of vertical vertical dimension that we're looking in, instead of this horizontal, more nation-state approach. So these are two of the main outcomes, I think, of that we want to work on in the future with the vertical atlas in the publication in the form of this atlas. I hope this gave an idea of what the project was about and where we will be heading to.
Thank you very much, Arthur. It's very interesting. It's a very ambitious project, and we're looking forward to this output and outcome. Thank you. Question? Please? 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 What time is it? Maybe it's also... Yeah. So if there is not any question, maybe if one of you wants to say something, to add something. Tricky? François? Emo?
I'm just trying to keep the microphone.
Arthur? So maybe I thank you for this hour that we have spent together. I thank you for your presentation, and I hope we continue also the journey together.